Hi there. All right, let's work on our conversion from milliamps to amps and micros and megas and kilos and all of that. Let's apply that to the actual questions that are in the question pool now. How many milliamperes are the same as 1.5 amperes? Well, the way I do this is I go 1.5 amperes and I say to myself, okay, well, first of all, a milliampere is going to be 1/1000th. I hope you took notes before, or you have the notes in your textbook somewhere. That also can read as 1/1000th or 0.001. That's how many milliamperes are in 1 amp. But that's not what the question is asking. The question is asking how many milliamps are the same as 1.5. Well, remember in metric it's just decimal places. You just move the decimal places. We're looking at 1/1000th, so we're looking at 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3. Because there's 3 zeros. So the question is, which way do we move the decimal place? Do we move it to the left or do we move it to the right? And here's how I always remember that. I look at the question and analyze what's it asking. Well, it's asking how many milliamps are the same as 1 amp. I know that there are more milliamps in 1 amp. That it's not like there's more amps in a milliamp. No, there's many amps in a mega amp or a kiloamp, but there's less amps in a milliamp, if that makes sense. The quantity is greater of milliamps as far as the way it reads with the decimal place. That's just kind of how I process it. I might have just confused you more, and if so, I apologize. But what we're going to do here is we're not going to go to the left because that would make it a smaller unit. It should be a bigger number because we're talking about amps to milliamps. We're not going the other way around. So 3 decimal places, we already established that. 1, 2, 3. So our end result is going to be 1500. 1500 what? Milliamps. And that's the answer. So all you have to do is move the decimal place. The hardest thing is, if you're not familiar with the metric system, is going to be making sure you understand which way to move the decimal place. So just memorize that milli and micro and centa are all less than the base unit, and kilo and mega are greater than. All right. Let's go through some of these other questions. Here's one. What is another way to specify the frequency of a radio signal? And they word this, like it's in practical terms, but don't let it confuse you. What is another way to specify the radio frequency of the frequency of a radio signal is oscillating at 1,500,000. Let's write that down. 1,500,000 what? Hertz. Because remember, that's cycles. Hertz is how we measure cycles. So we're measuring the cycles with hertz. 1,500,000 hertz. So what's another way to specify it or to say it? Okay, well, you're going to have some options here. One of the options they give you is 150 kilohertz. How many hertz are in a kilohertz? Well, remember our diagram before. How many volts were in a kilovolt? 1,000. That's 3 decimal places, right? So if we want to know, remember hertz, it's going to be a bigger number. So if we take 150 kilohertz and we move the decimal place 3 places, 1, 2, 3, to the right, that gives us 3 more zeros. That results with 150,000 hertz. Well, that's not the same as this, is it? No, this is 1,500,000. So you know that's not the right answer. Well, what about gigahertz? Well, 15 gigahertz. Well, 15 gigahertz, that's a pretty big number. We're getting up there. I'm not even going to write out how many zeros you would need. So you can pretty much just garner that that's not the right answer. What about 1500 megahertz? Well, how many hertz are in a megahertz? 1 million. Again, just memorize that. So that means we're going to move the decimal place how many places? 6 places. So that's going to give us 3 zeros there and 3 zeros there. That's 1,500,000,000 hertz. Well, that's not the right answer either. So let's look at this one. 1,500 kilohertz. Again, we're looking at 3 decimal places. We know that's going to be a bigger number. Move the decimal place 3 places to the right. And by this point, you shouldn't have to do the little loop thing anymore. We're going to add 3 zeros. And looky there. We have a match. So 1,500 kilohertz is the same as 1,500,000 hertz. Okay, let's look at a couple more questions. How many volts are equal to 1 kilovolt? How many volts are in a kilovolt? That's all that's asking. 1,000. 1,000 volts are equal to 1 kilovolt. Well, that's easy. How many volts are equal to 1 microvolt? Remember, we had micro and we had milli. And then we had centa. Micro is what? 1 millionth. So it says how many volts are equal to 1 microvolt? So if you have 1 microvolt, you know that there's going to, if you have 1 microvolt, that's the question, how many volts? I'm sorry, 1 volt, you know the number is going to be bigger because we're going to a smaller unit, microvolt. So how many places? Well, we're looking at million, 6 places. 1, 2, 3. So let me just, there's going to be too many loop-de-loops, so let's just do it like this. We're going to move the decimal place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 million. See, 1 millionth just translates to 1 million microvolts or in a volt. So, you know, it should all become very simplified as you see the way they do these. And the last question is, how many watts does a handheld transceiver put out if the output power is 500 milliwatts? Now, this is a little tricky. We're looking at milliwatts. If the output power of a transceiver is 500 milliwatts, how many watts is it putting out? I'm sorry, it's not that tricky. I thought it was asking us to figure something out. Oh, okay. Well, milli is what? Milli is thousandth, right? So we're looking at 3 decimal places. So 500 milliwatts equals how many real watts? Well, now we're going to go to the left. 1, 2, 3. 0.5 watts. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Just keep reading your textbook. There's plenty of resources online to help you understand these conversions. And for some of you, this will be old hat, but for some of you that's new too, just feel free to access the other resources, and we'll see you again soon.